This is Dry Falls State Park. Unfortunately, the visitor center is closed due to the coronavirus, but you can still stop and take a look at this very impressive area. The dry falls, the plunge pools that are filled with alkaline lakes. Looks like the one in the distance over there is dried up. I don't recall it being dry last year. I was here last year. I drove down to that road there, right next to this plunge pool lake. I forgot the name of the lake right now. I've got all that information available to me. I've got to look it up. But both of these lakes here, and this one looks like it's getting close to drying up. You get down to that road and you got 6-foot high weeds, if you will, and weeds is a bad name. It's the water plants right at the edge of the water, and you really can't see the lake from the shoreline out there without stepping through the muck and the high weed, or I'm sorry, the high grasses or plants right on the water itself to get to where you can see the lake. But you can see this big rock, and it is a very, very large rock that separates the two sections of Dry Falls. So if you look out there in the distance, I'm sorry, I'm pointing too far up and the sun's in that direction, but you look above the rock out in the distance there, and you can see there's the other section of the falls that you can't see from here. In fact, right on the other side of the rock, there is a outcropping from the waterfall. The waterfall continues behind that one as well. This waterfall is so big that from the ground, there's no place you can see the entire waterfall. It's that big. It's 5 times the size of Niagara. And if you look at just this area right here, this area right here is probably equal to Horseshoe Falls by itself. And then you have the second section over there, and then you have another section beyond over there, that the water was even flowing over the sides of the hills on the far side over there, as well as over the sides of the hills on this side. I'm going to go around to the visitor center there. It's closed, but I can take a look from the other side of the visitor center and see around this hill and see downstream. So I'll do that briefly. But right now, I am on this ledge, or perch, if you will, right above this part of the canyon here that is formed by the falls. And it's just this little area here that you get to step out on about 10-15 feet. And someone took my map. I'll get off of it and let someone else go out on it. And you can see it's just an area there that's out there. There are some information kiosks right here. So I'll come over to these. Bats and eagles happen to love the waterfalls. And it's like I said, it's not a lifeless desert. World's greatest waterfall without water. At 3.5 miles long and 350 feet high, Dry Falls would dwarf Niagara Falls. So there's your dimensions. Those walls are 350 feet high, and the falls continues out there for 3.5 miles. That is a monstrous waterfall. It shows here how it erodes backwards. You have the mild abrasion on the top, you have the collapsing cliff, you got the strong abrasion and plucking at the bottom where you have this column or basalt. It's being broken up by the plunge pool. You got deposition here downstream, and just this amount of water. The fact is, the amount of water was probably about as high as the cliff was above the cliff. So you had a massive amount of water coming over and probably coming out more to here, but you still had a tremendous amount of erosion going on and just breaking up of the rock, because over the series of however many floods came through here, this fall is now 20 miles north of where it started at, south of here, as it created the Lower Grand Coulee. As it says here, a plunge pool is a deep depression scoured out by the force of water tumbling over a cliff. Today, these lakes and ponds are fed by groundwater. Rocks and plants and landscape features provide us with many clues about the Ice Age floods and other stories of the area's past. What the small lakes called plunge pools at the base of the cliff tell you? Ice Age pools carved steamboat rock, a streamlined basalt mesa in Grand Coulee about 50 miles north of here. So this coulee continues up north of here another 50 miles. So had there been more floods, this waterfall eventually would have carved its way back another 50 feet all the way to where the Columbia River is up north today. As it says, Grand Coulee is up to 800 feet deep and more than 1 mile wide in some places. As they mention here, among the coulees they mention are Frenchman's Coulee, Moses Coulee, Potholes Coulee, and the largest of them all, Grand Coulee. You can visit many of the remarkable features created by the Ice Age floods, including Palouse Falls, which they show a picture of there, it looks like, Steamboat Rock and Beacon Rock. And as they say, they're not sure how many floods there were. Massive glacial dams and lakes. At times, the ice dam was more than 2 miles wide and 30 miles long, and about a half a mile high, which it doesn't mention. And they kind of show here, but it's very faded, how you got Glacial Lake Missoula, which starts at the ice dam here and goes back all the way into where Missoula is in Montana today. The ice dam broke in the panhandle of Idaho, crashing down into the Spokane area and into Glacial Lake Columbia. It came across, in many cases, just flooding the area where Spokane is and everything between Dry Falls today, and just created the scablands here as just water overtopped the boundaries of that glacial lake, and it actually changed the direction of the Palouse River, which it used to go down and into the Columbia River, but it actually changed its course and brought it down into the Snake River by literally changing its course with the water that overtopped that river and carved a channel to the Snake River. You have the Tri-Cities right near Wallula Gap. Yakima is just up outside of the area of the flood. And then, of course, down through the Columbia River and into Portland with the Willamette Valley that was filled up in the flood. And finally, it went out into the ocean. So you have a remarkable story of the flood, and they have a lot of information on it. And this is one of the most dramatic features of the flood, is the Dry Falls here. It's just an enormous area. And you can see, you know, there's some other people out there on the perch now, that you get a chance to get a really good look at the falls. There's a couple more signs here, so I'll walk over to them. And of course erosion today is breaking up the basalt and cascading it down the hills and these slopes. But at the end of any given flood, these hills would have been pretty much just straight up and down, maybe carved underneath a little bit by the plunge pool. The view of Dry Falls as it might have looked about 13,000 years ago during the last flood. And you could see from about here where I'd be standing, this is the big rock. This is the area of the falls I can see. And all this out here is out there where I cannot see it. So you can see what I can see from this area is I can see this part of the falls, and I can see this edge of the falls over top of the rock in the middle here, but I cannot see anything of this. So I'm probably seeing a little less than half the falls by total distance of it. But if you look at just straight line as the crow flies, I'm probably looking at about a third of the falls right now. Because you can see over here where that cliff face ends, and then you have the continuation on the far side over there. And it's just that big. Floodwaters, perhaps 300 feet above you, once rushed over these cliffs. During the Ice Age, glaciers to the north blocked the Columbia River and forced it to find a new route. The river, swollen from melting glacial ice, began to carve a new channel here, but that was only the beginning. The river in Idaho found no way around its ice dam. The river filled its valley with a huge lake that flooded many square miles of Montana until the ice dam broke. With a flow up to 10 times the combined flow of all the rivers in the world, the lake emptied across Idaho onto eastern Washington. Much of the water rushed through the new channel opened by the Columbia River. The turbulent water enlarged the channel and created huge waterfalls. Eastern Washington was scoured by many such floods, each lasting only a few weeks. When the last flood subsided, large areas of eastern Washington were left scarred with dry channels called coulees. This one, the Grand Coulee, is the largest. Cutting across the coulee is Dry Falls, is 3.5 miles wide and over 400-foot tall group of scalloped cliffs, was at one time the largest waterfall in the world. So we had one sign that said it's 300 feet tall and another saying it's 400 feet tall. And you had 300 feet of water coming over a 400-foot cliff. It probably looked more like a rapid of immense proportion than an actual waterfall when you think about that much water coming over the top. It truly was a remarkable thing, and if it was 300 feet above your head, you wouldn't have even been safe up on those hills, because those hills would have been overtopped with water. And the same would have applied to pretty much anything you could see out there. It just would have been overtopped with water as the water flooded everywhere until it could find its way into this channel and work downstream in the channel. But everything in the area would have been flooded with water, as there was just so much water coming through in such a very short time. Anyway, we have a big bush right now blocking the view of the overlook. So I'm going to walk around. As I said, I'm going to pause it here and I'm going to go around to the other side of the visitor center and take a view from there.